Hunters are definitely a different kettle of fish. They're unique in that they fight with ranged weapons, and I keep expecting to Blizzard to add another ranged weapon class any expansion now. Sea witches, tinkers, maybe even massaging necromancers into a ranged weapon class, insofar as they have skeletal marksman pets who get whatever weapons the necromancers happen to have equipped. But no, none of that has happened yet, even after 9 expansions. But another thing that makes Hunters unique is how often the same ability exists in multiple specs kits, but has a vastly different purpose. For example, Kill Command is an ability that generates focus for survival hunters, while it's a high priority focus spender for beast mastery. For another example, Chimera Shot is, at least in Shadowlands, a talent that can replace Arcane Shot for marksmanship hunters, making it their go-to filler focus spender. By contrast, it's not a filler spell for beast mastery, but a short cooldown, and it doesn't spend focus, it generates focus. Of course, Blizzard could end up completely revamping all 3 specs rotations so that these overlapping abilities have new standardized roles. Or they could make the class talent so context-sensitive that the existing roles stay. It's hard to say. Since there are a lot of unknowns for Hunters, a lot of what I say in reaction to the initial Hunter talents that Blizzard revealed in mid-July could get thrown completely out the window as soon as new information comes to light. Of course, that's true of all classes, but none more so than the Hunter, at least none so far. Furthermore, please take what I say with a grain of salt since I'm providing an outsider's perspective on it. I do not play a Hunter myself. All that being said, I'll provide whatever feedback I can about what Blizzard has provided so far in their reveal. I'd like to start by saying that a lot of the information I have about Hunters comes from doing research on icyveins.com. I did that research for Project Decade, and, well, while Project Decade was dumb, the research that it made me do was wise. And I learned that survival is in a pretty strange spot. As far as I can tell, it excels in multi-target burst damage, and that's kind of it. Mostly this is due to the fact that Carve and Wildfire Bomb are some pretty powerful multi-target damage cooldowns, at least as far as I can tell. It sure looked to me like Survival could use some more damage abilities, and, well, Explosive Shot, Chimera Shot, and Barrage are all in the class tree, easy for Survival to grab. I figure those are going to shake up the rotation and give players options for doing more single-target damage, but then again, Barrage is the only one of those that is single-target. Probably there should be another single target damage ability in there if Survival's going to get the depth it needs. All that is assuming that Survival will be allowed to use shot abilities. They may not be. I don't know what Blizzard will put in place of those talents if they aren't allowed to use shot abilities. Heck, this could go any one of a few ways the way I see it. Number 1, Survival gets to use class talent shot abilities even if they don't have a ranged weapon equipped. They're allowed to do it with Kill Shot and Serpent Sting in Shadowlands, so why not? Possibility number 2, Survival goes back to being a ranged weapon spec. This would be a huge revamp, not at all in line with the things Blizzard has said so far, and I'm not sure it's actually what Survival players would want in general. Possibility number 3, equipment is changed so that ranged weapons are once again a separate slot, so Survival has both melee and ranged weapons equipped so they have a mix of melee attacks and shot abilities. That third one has a lot of other benefits. As a Holy Paladin engineer, I have wished many times that I could craft a plus intellect rifle and equip it on my Paladin, and that might just be permitted if Dragonflight re-added the ranged weapon slot, but I digress. Odds are extremely high that Survival will massively benefit from the new talent system, and I sure hope they do. The Survival tree is, well, it's actually one of the better connected trees, with the kinds of paths that cross over easily. I really like to see that, as it creates a lot of player freedom and agency. There's choices you can forego, like Wildfire Infusion, Flanking Strike, and Mongoose Bite, and there's some interesting stuff deep in the tree. And when I look at it in terms of rhyme and reason, it kind of feels like talents that buff multi-target damage are on the left, and talents that buff single-target damage are on the right. The fact that talents like Spear Focus and Killer Companion require you to get Mongoose Bite give me mixed feelings, though. But my undereducated opinion is that the tree looks more or less okay, albeit with room for improvements that should be made before Dragonflight launches. take actual survival hunters players' advice about what to pivot on and how to improve it ahead of my advice, of course, but here's what I see from my outsider's perspective. I'm surprised that core survival abilities like Carve and Wildfire Bomb aren't at Tier 2. Compare that to Death Knights, who have their core abilities for each spec right at Tiers 1 and 2, and this design starts to look really questionable. Another interesting thing to note is Spearhead. It looks like it's an offensive cooldown meant to help with single target damage, which is new and definitely a good thing. But personally, I feel like 2 or 3 new rotational single target abilities would be an even more welcome addition to Survival's kit. That being said, it always makes me hopeful and happy when I see the devs actually adding new active abilities. I personally think every spec should have access to at least 1, preferably 2 or 3, new abilities when Dragonflight launches, and in a lot of cases, they do. Thank the light, they do. Unpruned abilities are great, keeping or unpruning passives are great, but if you really want to get players excited, add new active abilities. Moving on to marksmanship, most of the core abilities are there by Tier 3, with the exception of multi-shot. I feel like multi-shot should be shallower in the tree. Maybe I feel that way because, as a holy paladin, I hate the idea of having no multi-target damage abilities, and I had none in Mists and Warlords, which I did not like one bit, but I am massively digressing here. To be honest, I'm not seeing much rhyme or reason to the placement of talents in the tree. Survival had single target on the right and multi-target on the left, but here there's multi-target stuff on the left, on the right, and in the middle. There's bursty stuff on the left, on the right, and in the middle. There's not much rhyme or reason, and I'm wondering, would it be better if sustained damage were on one side or burst was on the other? Or would that be too powerful? I really don't know, and the opinions of actual marksman players should take precedence over my own here. I'm just providing an outsider's perspective. The abilities that I do see in marksmanship's tree look like a pretty good spread, and you can specialize yourself as you please, so maybe this is good even without the rhyme and reason that I keep talking about and keep using as a criteria for judging the trees. One more thing. The marksmanship talent tree is fairly well connected. It could be more so, but it's not bad. In general, I like well-connected talent trees, and I sure hope Paladin's trees are well connected when they finally get released. Now, before we move on to the class tree, which is a very different kettle of fish, I'd like to talk about Beast Mastery. Now, Beast Mastery is unique in that it's about the only DPS spec in the game that isn't build and spend. Name any other DPS spec and there's some resource or proc or buff or something that they build up and spend with various finisher abilities. Sometimes there's more than one resource, but Beast Mastery regenerates focus automatically. There are talents and cooldowns that can provide focus, but on the whole, it seems like it comes mostly from automatic regeneration. One of the weaknesses of Beast Mastery is not having much multi-target damage. The buffs to Beast Cleave, making it buff kill commands damage, will likely help. It's kind of unfun that these extra effects aren't baked into the active abilities and that you need to spend talent points to get the kinds of things we used to get for free. I suspect that as this talent system matures and the Blizzard devs get more confident working with them, they might just bake more effects into the active abilities. In the meantime, at least some new stuff is coming our way. For example, Call of the Wild today is a legendary passive that reduces the cooldown of aspect abilities. In Dragonflight, it's a cooldown that summons extra pets to attack your target. That is new for all intents and purposes. It makes me glad to see multi-shot and Cobra Shot nice and shallow in Tier 2, but I'm just a little confused by how Cobra Shot replaces Steady Shot. I'd have expected it to replace Arcane Shot since it's a focus spender. Then again, Hunters, the same ability can have a different effect for different specs, though it kind of makes me wonder what would happen if a Beast Mastery Hunter decided not to get Cobra Shot and stuck with Steady Shot as a tool to build focus whenever they wanted to. Would that enable a Beast Mastery Hunter to use more expensive abilities more often? And would that be a viable alternative build and play style? Should it be, all things considered? I don't know. Another observation is that Beast Mastery's talent tree isn't as well connected as Survival's or Marksmanship's. By Tier 7, you're pretty well committed, and there are some sections that are more or less cordoned off. Cobra Shot's child talents won't get you a path to Bestial Wrath, for example, even though Path Tactics child talents can. Though I'm a bit surprised Pack Tactics isn't baselined for Beast Mastery. And I'd like it better if it were a bit more connected, but what are you going to do? And what does my opinion matter? Not sure it matters less than a Beast Mastery player's would. As far as rhyme and reason goes, there's a little in a few localized areas, but instead of having a lot of little sections that have themes to them like Shadow does for priests, it seems like rhyme and reason is the exception and not the rule. There's some multi-target damage buffs down the middle at first, but pretty soon you get to the single-target stuff again. I'm not sure what the best way would be to add rhyme and reason. Having too many multi-target abilities and passives is probably a bad thing under the circumstances. Overall, I think good talents are included in the Beast Mastery tree, and while I could wish for more rhyme and reason and more connectivity, maybe those aren't fair opinions. And there are certainly better informed opinions out there. Finally, let's get to the most different kettle of fish yet, the Hunter class tree. Most classes have one column for each spec, and each spec has a different ability at the base of their respective column that you get for free. For Hunters, there isn't really a survival column at all, which is kind of unsurprising. Survival doesn't have enough active abilities to put into such a column. Instead, pet and beast-oriented skills tend to be over on the left, and shot-oriented skills tend to be over on the right. Also, Survival and Beast Mastery get Kill Command over on the left for free, while Marksmanship gets Kill Shot for free. Not that wowhead knows it yet. Some part of me is screaming an objection right off the bat. Ideally, must-have talents should not be at the base of the tree. At least not must-have talents for other specs that don't get them for free. And Kill Shot is already a part of both Beast Mastery and Survival's rotations. It should be baselined, I figure. I mean, I get that Hunters and their talents are a different kettle of fish in general, but that doesn't mean it's okay to put must-have talents in the class trees like this. If it were up to me, I'd actually have Multi-Shot as the Marksmanship starter talent, and I'd set it up so Beast Mastery gets both Kill Command and Multi-Shot, Survival gets Kill Command, and Marksmanship gets Multi-Shot. The thinking here is that the specs that already have Multi-Shot as part of their rotation get it automatically, and the spec that doesn't, Survival, has a use case for getting Multi-Shot. Again, assuming shot abilities work just fine for a melee spec like Survival. If you look at the single-target rotation for Survival versus their multi-target rotation, there's almost no difference. You cast Carve on cooldown if you can, with Kill Command and Wildfire Bomb as higher priority than that. Now pay attention to that. Carve has a cooldown. Multi-Shot does not, at least not for Beast Mastery Hunters. So I figured if Multi-Shot were properly balanced with what other abilities in Survival's kit would offer in terms of both damage and focus cost, Multi-Shot could be a viable alternative to Raptor Strike as a multi-target focus spending filler ability for Survival. In effect, a Survival Hunter who picked up Multi-Shot would be speccing themselves out to have sustained multi-target DPS. Last time I checked, Survival specialized in burst for multi-target damage. I figure the option for sustain is a good option. Now, there are some things I really like in the Hunter class tree. For example, the tree is quite well connected, and it gives players quite a bit of freedom. Also, there are quite a few interesting damage abilities in the tree. I could wish that there were brand new damage abilities in here, but it's mostly returning stuff that is or was deep in the trees in earlier expansions. Most of the damage abilities are deep, but what that means is that there's a real choice about how you're going to customize your rotation. There are things that don't look right to me in the Hunter class trees, though. I'm surprised that Serpent Sting was all the way down in Tier 8, past the 20-point requirement threshold. I mean, Serpent Sting is a core rotational ability for Survival, which means it should be pretty shallow in the tree. Plus, it's their only ranged damage ability with no cooldown. One of my design biases as a Holy Paladin is I think every spec should have at least one easily accessible ranged damage ability with no cooldown. Gaining and losing Denounce is what made me think that, and I am so hoping Denounce gets unpruned in Dragonflight. Fingers crossed. But anyway, Serpent Sting, in terms of talent point commitment, is an expensive ranged damage ability with no cooldown. To me, it should be over on the left, pretty shallow, at tier 5 at absolute deepest. Probably tier 2 or 3 would be better. It might feel better aesthetically if another damage ability or two were in the middle of the Hunter class tree, around tiers 5 or 6, but that would be just a nice to have. Good tree design is more important than aesthetic preference. Finally, I've already touched on this in earlier videos, but we really need some answers about how these shot ability talents would work for survival. If they simply exist and will function regardless of whether the hunter has a ranged weapon equipped or not, then survival's rotation just got a lot more interesting. One of the things I'd thought was that survival could use some powerful abilities on a fairly short cooldown, and barrage and explosive shot sure fit the bill. If anything, explosive shot plays off of survival's existing strength with multi-target burst damage. Who knows what chimera shot will look like for survival. If it's like the beast mastery version of chimera shot, then it'll be a 15-second cooldown that damages 2 targets and produces focus. Anyway, overall, most of what I see is good, but there's room for improvement. The fact that the hunter trees are so different from other specs trees is neither bad nor good in and of itself, and I think for the most part what they have will work. Then again, this is an outsider's perspective, and actual hunter players will have more and better information about these trees, so take my feedback with a grain of salt.